Hello everyone and welcome to this video going through the activity list. An activity list is a common and important tool in project management, and we're just going to be looking at what an activity list is, the purpose of an activity list, as well as working through the steps to create a basic activity list as an example. So an activity list is really simply just a list of actions or activities that we need to complete in order to produce specific project deliverables. So it's just a list of everything the project team needs to do during the execution phase in order to produce the deliverables, the items the project needs to output and hand over to someone outside of the project team. So when we're looking to develop our activity list, we have two particular documents which are really quite important for us to start doing so. We have the scope statement, which is a written prose statement of what the scope of the project is, as well as the work breakdown structure, which really does express the scope in the form of a decomposed list of activities stemming from a project deliverable. There is a video on work breakdown structures which you should watch first if you've not done so already. Those are the two documents which are important inputs for the activity list, but the activity list as well really helps us generate a few further documents which are really quite important. So when we have this list of all of the actions and activities and tasks that we need to do on the project, that helps us when it comes to developing a network diagram, which then helps us with scheduling and being able to visualize and move around activities in a way that's most efficient, as well as being needed for us to develop a CPA, so a critical path analysis, for us to understand what the relative importance of each of the activities on our list are, and which will affect our completion time if they are delayed. But all of those things need this list of activities before we can create them. So it is an important foundational piece of documentation that we have to create first. So if we start with a simple work breakdown structure, this is the same that we used in the previous video, and we can see here that we have three different levels of decomposed activities, and we also have some sub activities as well. So what we can do here when trying to take these elements and put them into a list is identify that we don't want to have any duplication. So in this case I've highlighted 1.2.1, and we can see that there are two sub activities that stem from this, and we can say that if we complete both sub activities, that is to say 1.2.1.1 as well as 1.2.1.2, then we would have achieved the preceding activity. So in this case, if we're listing the two sub-activities, we don't also want to list the preceding activity nor the preceding sub-deliverable, because then we're going to end up with a lot of duplicated items on our list. So we want to go for the lowest level of the WBS, or whichever items are unique and not duplicated by other items that we're going to put onto our activity list. So here, if we look at the items which are on the lowest level, we have two sub-activities, but we also have two other activities as well. 1.1.1 is the lowest level of that branch, and 1.3.1 is the lowest item on its own branch. So we can say that we've identified four unique activities here, and these can form the basis of our activity list. So we don't want to have duplicated items, and we don't want to have items which are really meta activities, that if we accomplish other activities, then we can say that this activity has also been done. We want to go for the lowest level on each branch. Now what we're going to do with these four items is place them into a table. So this is the common way to express an activity list, and we're going to have a few additional elements on this table as well. So firstly, each activity needs a unique identifier, because we're no longer using the hierarchical structure of the WBS. Once we move on to other types of project management documentation, we're going to replace that hierarchical code with a simpler kind of unique number or code in order to identify that activity, along with several other attributes which are useful in schedule planning and control. So the first thing to do would be to assign this unique identifier and place it within a table. So here we have our 4 activities and we are labeling them with a letter, which is going to serve as the activity ID. Now, this doesn't have to be hierarchical, but it does have to be unique. So we must have a unique ID for each individual activity or item that we've identified. Once we've done that, we can look to what the other attributes we want to have on the activity list table itself. Now, different projects will have different requirements, so you may find lots of different examples with different attributes, but generally speaking, we want at least these 3. So an estimated duration, so how long do you estimate each activity to take? Any preceding activities, which are, which activities have to have been done before we can start this activity, and then an activity owner, so someone who's clearly responsible for that activity. Now, it's owner rather than the person the task has been assigned to, because particularly when it comes to large complex projects, you're going to have multiple people working within a team on each of your activities. So we just want to identify the person responsible, the person who owns that activity. So if we use that in our example, we can go through one by one our example activity list. We can first add estimated duration. So here we can just say activity A takes 3 days, B takes 4 days, and so on. So that way we have an estimated duration, and that's going to obviously differ depending on what kind of project you're going for. Some may have estimated duration in weeks, some in days, some in hours. It really does depend. For the second, we can look at preceding activities. So here we can look at our activities and say, well, in order for activities B and C to start, we need to have already finished activity A. So that makes activity A preceding activity for activities B and C. And then we can say for activity D to start, activities B and C must have finished as well. So that makes activities B and C preceding activities for activity D. That's going to become particularly important when we move on and create our network diagram. So it's always good at this stage to sit down and work out what your preceding activities are. This is not an order in which you want to execute the project. Remember, we're not constructing a sequential order. We're not going to have projects, activity A through to how whatever activity finishes the project and set them in a sequential linear order. We're only looking for activities which have to be completed for your activity to start. And this is important because you may well have a project team which is working on multiple activities at the same time. So we're not going to place them into a straightforward order. We're only looking for necessary preceding activities. And then lastly, we have the activity owner. So here, if you've been asked to create an activity list for an assignment, it's very unlikely that we're looking for individual names. We are looking generally for team roles. So here, project manager and team member is absolutely fine. Right? And so that's a very simple example of an activity list.